Thank you. Okay. Calling the meeting to order, 7 o'clock. Welcome everybody. Good to see you all. Does anyone have a short reflection they would like to start us with? What can she have? Shaking your head this time today.
I always tell myself, all right, I'm gonna bring something next time, but I got none.
Okay, we can jump right past the short reflection. Introductions. I feel like are also unneeded.
I think so.
Nobody new, no visitors with us this evening. Moving straight on to adoption of the agenda.
Yeah, I move adoption of this agenda. I'll second it.
Before we vote, approve, my recollection last time, Christy, was that you and Mark had talked about you wanting to do a presentation or overview of kind of like your position in tree permitting, something like that.
Yes.
Is that something that was supposed to be on tonight's agenda and we missed? Or
Well,
is that getting delayed?
Delayed
Okay.
with, I'm gonna kind of propose it today with the homework, and then
Great.
we'll do kind of more of like an overview and Q&A for me in September.
Great.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that I realized today, I was like, we talked about that.
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing it on.
Yeah,
Great.
call, but thank you.
In that case, would you like to try again, Mark?
Yeah, I still move that we approve this agenda.
I'll still second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Great, adoption has been approved. Or, agenda has been adopted, rather. Approval of minutes from last month. Any edits or corrections? Would anyone like to move to approve?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes approved. Nobody here for public comment. We are plugging on through this. Item number 7 at 7:02. Let's go. Reports and announcements. Larry and Christy, I usually look to you guys first for anything from Councilor City.
I don't really have any updates from City Council. Most of what we've been doing has just been routine contracts and budget stuff, getting ready for budget season for the biennial budget.
Thank you.
And
Oh, I guess one thing, it's not tree board related, but the mayor has appointed a new police chief, Diego Zanella, he's currently the interim police chief after Mike Hart's retirement. So he'll be officially sworn in as the permanent police chief next Thursday.
Great.
Thank you.
and I got the corridor tree permit from Sound Transit.
Oh, wow, all right.
Oh,
Big
yeah.
announcement.
Big announcement. I've been waiting for it. It came in last Friday, and I am just dipping my toes in. There's a big long arborist report that I cannot just glaze over, reading it, scrutinizing it. And more to come on that. Yeah.
So what's next, or what's the timeline that follows that? Is there a set timetable, or is it, does you figure it out?
No set timetable. Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of review back and forth, I would imagine. And we're still kind of like figuring out how to track our hours and how to communicate in the best way with like our software system that we use for permitting, to kind of keep that organized with all of the reviews. It's going to be a lot of back and forth for sure. Yeah.
So, is there gonna be time at some point to work on the tree code revision, municipal code revisions?
Yes. Yep. That's still to come. Most likely September too. So you might see that on the agenda for September. Yeah.
And regarding how a few meetings ago, there was someone who came in and talked about the trees on her property that it was being affected by sound transit.
Yep.
Is that a part of this? Is that a part of their permit?
Yes, yep, yeah, her trees are accounted for, yep.
And how is like, are the homeowners a part of that at all, part of the process or any kind of communication?
Yep, yeah, we have like boxes and boxes upon mailers, so everybody who's affected will get a piece of mail that kind of gives them the notice of application that Soundtrans has put in their application. Just a heads up, and I would imagine once those get mailed out, we're gonna have some more folks dropping into the
Right.
meeting. There were a few, just like on the first, I think I only got into like 3 pages of the arborist report. It does sound like there was a few private properties that they did not get approval for access to. So there's some estimates on those ones, which will for sure require like a site visit from me. Because they just kind of estimated the DBHs and species and all that sort of thing, so. But I would imagine it would go to like many people back here.
Yeah, I know part of the concern that was brought up was folks feeling like there was a discrepancy between what they saw in their yards and what they saw on initial reports from the ST3 folks. Do you have anything you are able to share with us at this point about like what your process, what you're planning for as a process to like double check that what they put in is what's realistically going to be removed? And if you are not able to share
Yeah, I
anything
don't
of the
know,
process
like,
point.
I don't know if I have a plan for that just yet. Probably start with people who are kind of loud and requesting my site visit. A lot of like GPS, like visuals, King County IMAP. But right now, as far as like what I read in the first 3 pages, is they're just like raw numbers. Like
Yeah.
this many significant trees, this many landmark trees, there's one exceptional tree. And then they were like, there's this many in the current right of way, like the existing right of way, and then there's this many in like basically the portions of people's property that they
Yeah,
collected. So that's kind of nice that they kind of divided those. I could see just how many residence trees are affected versus right of way trees. So yeah.
does their application include, I know for a personal tree permit, I had to do a map of the property with all of the trees marked out and which tree was going to be removed and where the replanting was going to be. Do they submit like maps
could-
indicating which trees are being removed on each property, or?
It could be in the
Somewhere
file
in the
uploads that
stack.
they
Okay.
oh yeah. When I came back from the weekend, I had 80 emails, and those were all like file uploads.
Yeah,
That wasn't just tree permits, it was also critical area permits, but 80 different separate files
okay.
to review. So yeah, it's probably in there somewhere. I hope so. That would be really helpful for me. But basically for right of way corridor, it's supposed to be a 1-to-1 replacement. So yeah, and right now they've provided like an overall square footage lots too, which I think was 143,000-ish square feet.
Okay. No, not a tree trunk here, not a beach layer here.
Canopy
Yeah,
canopy coverage, yeah. So
Is there a point in the process, Christie, where that application becomes available for the public?
good question. Larry,
sure
could you
there is,
answer
right?
that? Would that be a public records request? Is it?
I don't know, you see that stuff, for many other development applications, you'll get a notice from the city with a link to whatever file are available at some point, often.
I mean, my understanding is that permit applications are public by default. So I would have assumed they would just be all on the city's website in the same way that, like, I installed an HVAC system last month, and so that permit application is publicly available on the city's website. So
Yeah, but
that was my
Mark
assumption, is that you would just need to search for it.
yeah, well, Mark's asking to be able to see all of their file uploads too, so, site plans and all of that. Of
But
thing.
isn't that part of the, like if you search for my HVAC permit, yeah, my assumption is you would get like the diagrams provided by the installation company and all the like the supplemental documents. So I guess that was my assumption, is that's the default.
Yeah, I've only done like the back, you know, back of house. I've never tried from public facing to
Um,
review anybody's permits.
Yeah, that's.
So I can't speak to that.
another option might be,
No, no, not just taking notes, but it does make sense to be the.
Sorry.
It should be a public.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of something, right?
since this is a special project, I know the city has a BRT website that has like all, whenever Sound Transit would put out, here's the 70% design and here's maps for that. So I would imagine, since that web page already exists, the city could link to the Sound Transit's applications and supporting documents. That way there's a clearinghouse. You don't have to try to figure out, well, what's the permit number, or is it a different number for each, like for trees versus sidewalks or something. So maybe that's the best way. Also, I'll point out, it, sorry, apologies. I'm a little flustered. We have a drywall person here tonight. That's why I'm not in person at City Hall. The city council approved contracts with 4 different agencies, which can help to process these permit applications, just because it's going to be too, across the board, it's going to be too much. And so some of these may be processed by outside agencies, just the sheer amount of work. But yeah, I think maybe the best way is if we have a centralized website that has all that.
I looked at the, not the current one, but some of the past city Sound Transit website things. And they wouldn't be as enough detail to say, well, we're taking out a 17-inch tree here and a 6-inch tree here. Maybe the most recent ones are. But what used to be available on the Sound Transit website wasn't that detailed.
My gut instinct says that you do need to put in a public records request to access that. That it's not just readily available. But I'm also speaking to like private, property owners. I'm kind of remembering hearing it like in the office when somebody's like, well, can I see this person's like site plan? It's like, it'll have to be a public records request. It's public, of course, but the request has to be put in to access it.
Like, kind of following up
I
on
don't know.
Doug's comment, I know like when there was a serious work going on in the town center, there was like a separate link off of the main
Yeah.
city
That's what
website.
Larry was
And they definitely do
referring
have
to.
one for Sound Transit, yeah. And like Doug was saying.
There might be
there's no
something
robotic.
similar like that with whatever documents as they evolve or.
Yeah.
made available.
Yeah, it's possible that they'll land there, but I
Yeah.
can't speak to that, just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Good luck.
Thanks.
This sounds like a huge thing that's just landed on your desk. Is there any way that we can support you, like make sure you DBH or with you or anything like that?
Oh, well, like Larry mentioned, we're hiring, I think Facet was one of the contractors that we were wanting to work with to help with some of the permitting. And I don't know if y'all heard, but Drew landed there. So I think I might have the opportunity to work with Drew a little bit. So, yeah, I think we will have outside contractors that will be assisting.
So I thought Drew was working for some national.
Yeah, she just left maybe a month ago or so. Yeah,
Good.
yeah. No.
Too bad. Sounds like a great job. Oh, well. Oh, apparently it wasn't. From her perspective, I was agree. You said that some people. They haven't been able to get onto some people's property, but can, if that property is eventually gonna be taken over, can you sort of condemn your way onto the property and make the measurements? I mean, can the city force them to let you in? If it's going to become Sound Transit property?
Yeah, yes, yeah. Yeah,
It may
is
be
it
nuisance.
eminent domain, I think?
Never know. I mean. I guess you don't know whether they tried to get on those properties or just couldn't get a hold of a homeowner, something
Yeah.
like that. Which
Yeah,
Ever they refuse to let them on, it's a different thing.
right, yeah, not certain about that, but, I think too, at the time that this arborist report was, um. Produced, maybe that they didn't have, they hadn't ironed everything out as far as, yeah, taking over the property.
It's, I guess it's totally irrelevant, but people can have a lot of affection for trees that are in the right of way. They're in front of their own house. I do. We have
Yeah.
a couple of magnificent cherry trees in our right of way. Apparently, would not even be considered. Well, our interest in it wouldn't even be considered. And I don't know. It could be, but it's not quite right to say just because it's in the right of way that nobody cares.
Right.
Because and I'm pretty sure Dick cares about once he's got this right away.
Eminent domain is the emotional domain.
Oh, both.
Thank you for the update.
You're welcome.
Any other announcements or reports? Other things going on with the city we should know about?
That's it for me. Moment.
Not sure if this is the right place to bring it up, but we talked before about needing to get a permit for in removing invasive species if they're over 6 inches PBH. And which makes perfect sense, and we want to know what's going on. But is there any way we could waive the $120 fee for that?
There's not, Mark learned this, he had his invasive species, but he had critical area present. Usually when you're removing any amount of invasive species, if critical area isn't present, it's always a minor tree permit. Which just has less criteria required of you for the application process. Fortunately, we don't have anything in place at the moment to waive the fee to remove invasives. One thing I thought of was if you have neighbors who also have invasives, you can kind of all get in on the same permit and pay that, like split that $120 fee.
Also, they don't all have to be on the same property.
No, we could wiggle that one.
Right. We got to fit down.
Yeah.
If someone were to go out and it's like middle of the night, riddle the trees, from became a dead tree, then there would be no need for a permit. It would be illegal, of course, but.
Yes, it would.
So,
No comment.
so would you need a permit for a dead tree if it's in a critical area?
Ooh,
Invasive species of critical interest.
That's a question that comes up.
it's come,
Yeah.
and we've dealt with it here. That was a tricky one. Yeah, because in a critical area, you kind of just want nature to take its path and let the tree fall where it will, but sometimes there's still potential target. So, we have actually had somebody require somebody to pay for, because it really did require quite a bit of review still. The critical area administrator, Mark, we did site visits, put a lot of effort into it, worked with the contractor who performed the removal to just really like make it clear to them how delicate, the environment was, and that they're following, the best practices to not impact that critical area.
That makes
So
sense.
that's a tricky one. And that could maybe somewhere be in the code at some point or another where,
Yeah, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time,
yeah,
Well, the tree,
Yeah, and every wheel is gonna be different because as we were just saying, we had a tree that died in our backyard once, so we left the standing so we could get it in at chickadees.
yeah,
That's it, which was great. But it was in such a place where if it fell, it was gonna hit our house.
Yeah.
Or actually, when it died, the arborist topped it so it would hit our house.
Yep.
Well.
and that's it.
So
That
I mean,
was-
if it's gonna hit your house, it's a much different thing than it's out in the middle of forest.
the code stuff talks about hazardous trees. But it doesn't, and so there's an assumption, I think, on some people's part that a dead tree would be a hazard.
But it isn't
It doesn't
necessarily.
necessarily need to
Yeah, no,
be, so
that's
the-
Right.
So there is kind of that area that's not really.
Yeah.
You could argue that removing it is a hazard to the wildlife.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think we're moving into old business. KCD Map, just checking in, any update on getting access to it?
Nada.
Okay, I think that's the extent of the conversation there then.
Nothing new yet.
Tree giveaway. I believe
Yes.
I saw some chatter, correct? Some updates?
Yeah, well, so I think I shared with you all a note from Barbara Brown. That kind of laid out how we could work with 300 trees this fall if we want to do that. The gist of that was, so they have trees, and there was a list of prices that was included in that note that I forwarded to you. The most expensive ones are $7, a little less than $7. And there's some for $4.25. Gary Oaks are $4.25. So there is a cost, which is a pretty reasonable cost. And I guess what I was suggesting to her was, well, we probably wouldn't want to do a giant tree giveaway. That if we did 50 or 100 trees, I think that would be something that we could handle and would still be a significant kind of activity on our part to do. So you're talking somewhere between $350 and $700 cost to buy the trees. We want to start working on if we want to do that. So they would like to know how many trees we want by August the 21st. So this would be a time for us to decide that. And what kind of trees. Yeah, and what kind of trees, our best, and they said they can't necessarily guarantee, but they gave a list of the trees and we can certainly do that. They will do two, and they say they deliver the trees, which I had to reread to understand that, but they will deliver it to a site that we might want them to come to, figure out what that would be. They will deliver the week of October 5th and the week of November 2nd. So I guess we need to decide when we want it, if we would want to do that in October giveaway, if we want to wait till November to do it. We have that option. We have two opportunities in the fall to do that. I assume that a date we would set pretty closely follow that delivery of those trees.
There was something in one of these, somewhere that said that their 2026 options were closed.
Yes,
Yes, this is 2026. So are we talking about doing it 2026? Because I couldn't quite understand it, that's why.
we're talking about this fall.
Right.
There's another larger program, I guess, that they have that that some cities, Bellevue and Kirkland, I think, or among others, maybe several others, not many, have kind of bought into, and it requires a $4,000 partnership fee that you pay, and you get some kind of support on the distribution process, and you get some other things that didn't seem to add to $4,000.
And that's what's full, as far as I understand.
That's what.
That's what's full. They said the 2026.
Yeah,
We're
we would have had to apply for that in January, she said, if we wanted to be a part of that, but still, we can participate on this ad hoc basis, I guess, by piggybacking on the purchasing they'll be doing with those other cities.
So it would be piggybacking on their purchasing, but we wouldn't have any further support from them. So we would need to figure out how to run the giveaway, how to do applications, how to do communications, distribution, all of that independently and without any sounds like the toolkit is basically their plug and play template to say, here's how you should do it.
Yeah, that's right. So we need to decide if we want to pursue this, and I don't know why we wouldn't. We've talked about doing something like this, and I think there are ways we could make it somewhat simple. I think one question is what you raised, Victoria, is if there's going to be a registration process, a sign up process, or is it going to be first come, first serve? Which would be another way to do it. We'd have to figure out what a registration or pre-sign up process looked like, I guess, and how we would manage that. It's probably something we could figure out how to do. It would certainly be easier to do it on a first come, first served basis.
I wonder if there are any city events during October 5th, November 2nd. That's quite specific dates, but it could be they can always do a delivery if you guys did something like a small amount, just to dip your toes in and
Yeah, right.
get a feel.
You said it was the week of October fifth.
Pardon me?
The week of October fifth would be the first delivery.
And
Yeah.
then November
Week of
2nd.
October the 5th, and then November the 2nd is the other option.
Bummer, because Corey asked me today if we wanted to be at the Pause in the Park event on October 3rd,
Oh.
so. But if we are
But-
looking at doing a giveaway within a week of that, we could certainly attend a table and advertise a giveaway at that point. Or collect registrations for a giveaway.
What were the dates on those things? Sorry.
October 3rd
Oh,
is the
third,
Pause in the
that's-
Park event.
So I put for doing it in some on each and just have a small one for the first one, just to get our feet wet, see how it goes.
Well, I need to know a number by August 21st. Total number for both, whether we go with either one of those.
Oh, we can't do both? They have half of them on one day and half on the next?
I suppose we could, but we need to
The
tell
goals
them
are
what
what
that total
villages.
number of trees
Yeah.
was
Right,
by August 21st.
yeah,
I'm coming into this feeling kind of cautious about it, folks. I'd like to see us do something that's manageable and that we could do and would still be a significant kind of event. I asked her, what if we have trees left over? And she says, well, then we can find places for those trees, but we can't buy them back. So we would have the trees, other cities might have a use for them or something like that done. So
or if we had them delivered to 5 Acre Wood, we could plant the extra ones in 5 Acre Wood.
well, yeah,
I would assume with city approval, since that's city property, correct?
Right,
Yeah.
So we would need to work with, I would assume Public Works to get approval for
Everything
wood.
that serves is a coordination with those.
I think a critical point of this, our plan would be how and where would we distribute them? And when they distributed it, the ones in Bellevue that I picked up a few, they had a nice drive-through process at a big church in Bellevue. And there's certainly, I'm sure the church here would consider that, drive in one and exit the other.
I'm curious if the water district would let us use their parking lot and also promote their plant exchange.
well, good idea.
Where does the water district have its parking lot?
Right around the corner between here and the Presbyterian Church.
You say parking lot.
You know, where you drop off you used to drop off your bill for the water district.
Well, it's not my district, so I never did.
Oh.
It's on the same street and the same
It's a
side of
gate
the
to
street.
go
as the
into
church.
that, you would keep going to the gate.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Inside the gate, there's a fairly large parking lot with their building at the back,
Oh.
I assume their office at the back, and then their
Well-
plant exchange at the front.
I've got a couple of Gary Oaks and other things in
That
there.
might be a possibility. One of the elementary schools might be a possibility where they, see it happening at Brookside Elementary pretty easy where you have 50 or 75 trees or whatever you have lined up and cars just come in.
Ideally, having it somewhere that could hold them for us between whenever they're delivered and
The
whenever. we
water
distribute
district
them.
might be nice for that purpose.
That's what I'm thinking, if
Yeah.
we can claim a corner of their parking lot over by the,
But we should look at that site carefully. I'm not as familiar with it.
do you want me to reach out to Alan and ask? Or do you have contact?
They might be very happy to be partners in it with us on this.
Right.
They're-
They've been very enthusiastic and they come and chat with us at pretty much all of the tabling events and have been very enthusiastic about it.
I would just want to be sure that it was in and out kind of access and people weren't going in.
But it's a
having
pretty
to
big
back out
area,
the same-
yeah.
Out the same
Yeah.
way kind of thing.
Yeah,
And I just not familiar with the site, I guess. Yeah, that would be and that would be they have other plants there, they have pots, things there. So it might be that would be a good place to stage this.
how big are these trees?
The trees are gonna be like the ones I got, they're about 3 feet.
Oh, okay, that's
Oh,
easy to
We
transport.
got 50, that's.
They don't require pickup truck to carry.
yeah, a couple. If we're just shuttling between two locations in Lake Forest.
When people come to pick them up, they don't need to pick them up.
No, they really don't.
If we are trying to move 70 of
Well,
them,
no,
it
that's
would
awesome.
be more
Yeah,
logistics,
people
but
picking them up.
picking up one or two of them.
Yeah.
That was a selling point too for them, that you don't need a pickup truck, you can get a big car. So I guess, we have time to explore, to flesh out a plan. But they do need to know the types of trees and the numbers of trees. I think it's at least that decision we need to make here. And I guess we gotta put some kind of wheels in motion, probably through Christie
to lay a groundwork with the city. And I imagine Corey might be very interested in this, as a community outreach event. Or helping with it, and to be able to write a check for, it's gonna be well under $1,000 for the trees.
So that's one of my questions. I know we have money in the city's tree fund. What do we need to do to access that money or get approval to spend that money on this? Are either of you able to answer that question?
Larry's quite carefully looking
Maybe
up.
Councilmember Goldman? Do you have any idea?
I don't have definitive information. I know that at our last budget and finance meeting, that the tree account was listed in kind of the list of all the different funds. So I can see where the money is there. But in terms of who needs to approve it, I'm not sure if that's the finance director or Christie or Mark Hoffman. I could,
I'm guessing it's Mark.
Last time we looked, there was like $40,000 in there, so like, pretty sure 600 is not gonna stretch it. That doesn't mean,
Yeah.
it is still an issue who signs it.
Yeah.
I think we had a lot of money.
If it's a 2-month approval process to get on whoever's radar and get it through approvals,
Yeah,
then
that's the.
that's the bigger concern I have.
When is the next big piece of paper that comes off the city, whatever we call that thing, big city news?
Did you guys get your?
The deadline for and putting information in it just passed last week.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is that,
But we can.
We
put out
have
notice.
2 more events between
Yeah.
now and then, possibly 3 that we'll be tabling at. We have we can get it on city socials and other things. So I'm not too concerned about getting the word out. I'm more concerned about like getting the appropriate approvals and logistics behind the
Before
scenes.
August 21st. Yeah.
actually, I'm worried about getting news out, more people that know about it, the better, and that's.
Sure, but that's where it is.
That's people we got.
I don't know if we have another opportunity, but
I guess we don't
Communication
November
seems
2nd,
like
May.
the easiest of
Yeah.
the challenges for logistics to solve.
Are you able to get to the tree code quickly?
Maybe.
Thank you.
What do we?
I'm wondering if at the bottom of our tree code, I know it says something about. The tree fund, so I'm like, does it say who controls that? Chapter 16, 14.
Or whether this qualifies as an expense.
Or more so, who has the final say? How do the funds get accessed?
I don't think that's in that whole,
Not.
but I would bet it's Mark Hoffman who would make the decision to approve that funding.
Mark, I don't, my opinion is I like the idea of keeping it simple.
Yeah.
Getting 50 trees, variety, so and doing a first come first serve, and so our focus will be on communication and education, so that when people come by, it'd be easier for people to get one. You're not doing a lot of tracking, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I do too. I would feel very comfortable with 50 trees. That we could handle that, and I hard to imagine there wouldn't be 50 people.
Yeah.
Close to it who would be interested in getting a tree.
And if there were, like Ross said, that if you go into parks, they can go to the water district. With their,
So is there kind of consensus around the 50 as the number we might be interested in?
Like a place to start now.
We'll have a chance to do this next year, I would guess, if we want to pursue it again, and if this turns out to be successful. I do have still 6 other trees that I already picked up, which could go into the mix.
so we'll get 44.
Yeah. So, 50 sounds like a great number. October to the time to do. October's a better tree planting weather than November.
Is it?
Well, yeah, it's warmer, not as wet.
Well, you want it wet, don't you?
I'm talking about people, not for the trees.
And it's also light later in the day too, so.
It's like they're there, right?
That work,
I don't know what you think, Christie, is it just?
I assume either, but you want the rains to have started, I believe.
I feel like people who are excited to get a free tree might not mind a little precipitation.
Yeah, they can choose with, when they put it in the ground.
Yeah.
Within a certain range of time.
Yeah.
But it's, I don't know how we would decide which October or November is preferable for us.
I would vote on October just because November kind of gets busy. All three things.
So that they would deliver the trees the week of October the 5th. And these are, again, probably details that we can work out, if we know that October is where we want to go. Some point, we'll need to tell them where to deliver those trees. And we can do some research on that.
Yeah.
Did you see the list of trees? Recall that list of trees? The ones that I, on the ones that attract my attention are the shore pine, the serviceberry tree, the cascara tree, the Douglas fir, and the western red cedar. Besides those, there's the black hawthorn, there's vine maple. Gary Oak, I think here, I'm sorry, Gary Oak should be on the list, I think.
It should. So
He should be, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know, sure, I like the short pine, I like the Gary Oak. Those are also trees that Ross and I have learned are rated high in terms of adaptability towards changing climate.
We should make sure we have ones that are, going to grow to be smaller, for people who don't have the space.
Vine maple would be good for that.
I'm thinking that for each of these trees, we would want to prepare a one-page summary with a photo and
About the tree, how to plant it.
how big it's gonna get and that kind. Yeah.
I wish I had that for my kids.
Well, let's say Gary Oak is one that we want, Shore Pine is another we want. So the other choices that are the cascara, the serviceberry, the cascara.
serviceberry is quite small. I mean, I was just looking it up online.
Yeah, I guess it can be a shrub or it
Tree.
can something become a tree.
It says 3 to 15 feet, sometimes taller.
Yeah.
Those will be short lived. Most will live 20 years, but a few will live longer, so. I mean, fair number to lot short trees. I'm not really, this is not against or for, I'm just sort of describing it.
I like the idea though of having trees that will fit a variety of lots, because a lot of people just don't have that much space, to put up trees.
The serviceberry does produce fragrant white flowers. And the berries actually are edible and are not bad to eat.
Sounds like a good one for the small side. I would be real excited about the red cedar. It's a wonderful tree, but the drier we get, the harder it is for red cedar. It'll survive.
Yeah, good point.
I think that's why I like Gary Oak. It's
Yeah.
more adapted to dry weather, and so is short pine.
Do you have any thoughts about the cascara tree? I've got
I don't know that.
two of them. It's a deciduous
I
tree.
think Google it too.
We've got some down in the Lion Creek that
Yeah.
Richard Olmsted talked about it. It was one of his favorites.
We saw.
And it
saw one or
doesn't get
two.
too high and it's kind of slow growing as I recall.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an intermediate one.
Well, does serviceberry make the list?
I would, I was like, yeah, it's not more.
I like what your point about just trying to access as many types of properties as possible.
So Google's AI says. Cascara also is 15 to 30 feet. Small berries, sharp red in the summer, favored by local birds and wildlife, doesn't say we're local, but.
Minda's hand is raised if you had a comment.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm sorry for joining the late. I apologize, and I've also missed a couple meetings. I was excited about the tree list. A lot of these trees I planted over 6 years ago in this kind of experiment that I did around the forest, seeing which would survive with water, heat, just learning about these trees and what did well. A lot of it's the soil, the light, the water, the company they're with, and the space that they have to grow and really spread out. And I would say that of the list, the cascara and the Doug fir are, as well as the red cedar, they really love each other. They just bloom the next to each other, and salal, you put some salal in there, and sword fern, and it's just a family that really loves each other. For some reason, the red cedar has been thriving very well. I think once it gets tapped in into its deep roots, into the water underneath us, deep in the ground, depending on where you plant it, it's a really incredible, resilient tree. So I wouldn't write it off so much for climate change. It's doing pretty well, but it has to be tapped in into the deep root system. And that takes a few years. And yeah, the cascara, it just grows so nicely, and it's amazing tree. And I've gone a month away from my property and not a drop of water, and it's still like during this prolonged drought and heat dome that we've been under, it's doing really, really well as the Doug fir. But again, a lot of it's just based on where they're planted, the light, if they've got the full sun, part sun, if it's in the shade, I think it's just not going to do well. So it was hard to know what to choose based on not knowing clearly the space and the light that it was being given and the soil it was going in to the ground.
Yeah, well, that's why we were thinking, presumably if we could give them like a one-page description of the tree and it's what it needs to thrive, like shady conditions or sandy soil or moist soil, that kind of thing, might help people make a decision about it, about which tree they might want.
That makes sense. We could tell people that if you live near a creek or an area that there's plenty of groundwater, the red cedar would be perfect. But on a place like ours, where it's up on a hill with the sand, ours, we really need to supplement with water, unfortunately.
Well,
Yeah.
I do believe that all of these trees are going to require hand watering, or like, careful watering for a couple of years. Till they reach that point you're talking about, Linda.
What about water bags? I got these little water bags that are self-watering because they collect the rainwater. And they've been great. They've kept, I've had some like really far up on the hill cedars that I planted, and I put these little water bags, and they're amazing. I've kept those trees alive and growing, and I don't have to worry about climbing that hill to water it.
Yeah, they're installing those at 5 Acre Wood, I know.
Hmm.
Well, I did some research into those, as a matter of fact, looking at what they would cost and if there's any chance the city could give those away. And it does get expensive.
Corey's got some.
Corey has some.
Yes,
Like-
I think they were supposed to come for the sustainability fair, but they came very, very late. AKA like
Look into
2
that.
weeks ago. The only thing is they're the gator bag style, so it's kind of like a cone. The trees that you've kind of described were gonna be too spindly to support that. You'd want
Yeah.
at least like a 2.5 inch
Yeah.
caliper.
Yeah, those are great.
Maybe like a 1 inch caliper at the smallest.
Yeah.
But it could be a fun little double giveaway. Maybe they have another tree on site that could use a water bag. But I know she's gonna be looking for some sort of event to disperse those.
There's another style of those too. It's like an inner tube that wraps
Donut.
around the tree.
Mhm.
More appropriate for the size
Yeah.
of trees.
But I saw at least we could give information.
I was gonna say, it seems like having a one pager of like how to care for trees and after planting for the first couple of years could be a good thing for us to develop
Yeah.
and be able to hand out. Planting FAQ and maintenance FAQ. I think one of my questions is we're thinking about like how many different types of trees do we want to select to offer? Would be, are you picturing having people sign up in advance and claim a specific type of tree? Or are you expecting folks to come and drive up and select from whatever we have available? In which case, like processing all of that information about like a whole one pager about multiple different species may be overwhelming for folks if we have more than a couple to choose from.
Yeah, I think the biggest, simplest way to deal with that, one way to deal with that would be whenever we announce it, say these are the 5 trees we're offering. Like two or three lines by each tree, not 2 or 3 heritage, 2 or 3 lines. This one has berry, it's
Yeah.
frequent and dry conditions. This really needs water when it's challenging. The fewer
Are we talking
types.
about doing it as a first come, first serve though, that if only
well,
one of
yeah,
those five
yeah.
works for you and you don't get there right when
But
we
you
open,
but you don't have to get there and decide.
we may not have anything.
The fewer types we offer, the less chance for disappointment.
Yes,
People, if you don't get to choose between 2 or 3.
unless we wanna have some form of sign up in advance that has, you are claiming a specific tree and we max out and then remove from the form when we run out of firs or whatever. And so you know that whatever you signed up for that works for you is what you.
Is there a way
So-
we could do that?
I mean, yeah, there's plenty of ways that we can do an online form, we need someone to monitor it and
Yeah.
pay attention to how many people have claimed each type of tree and remove options and.
I think we start with simple, like we're suggesting where.
First come, first serve.
First come, first serve.
And if they all go quickly, then next year we'll say, okay, let's plan this out, let's get more trees, sign up. But
Somebody's hard to and move on together, my.
give it 20 years.
Larry has his hand raised as well.
Minda, you're on the tree board, so you can go first.
Oh, I was just thinking if it's first come, first serve, you maybe should definitely put a limit because, there's always someone that might take like all the trees. That's all.
I assumed it would be limited either one per household or like two per household.
Yeah.
Lauren, can I share my screen?
Think so.
Okay.
Oh.
Are you seeing like a shoreline PowerPoint?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is from Shoreline's Communitrees giveaway from this year. So just to kind of give you a sense for what like the amount of information Shoreline is giving you. So, just general information about size. And then for each species, there's just sort of like a brief summary, how big does it get? Does it have special requirements? So, for someone, who's a novice to trees, they can just kind of say, oh, am I looking for a 50-foot tree? Am I looking for an 80-foot tree? Here's a 20-foot tree. And, does it need full sunshine? Can it be under something else? So
Yeah.
that's kind of and also pictures of what the tree looks like. So I think that to me seems like a good amount of information to provide the public.
Yeah, I like that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, let's steal that.
We're done.
So with only 50-ish trees and first come, first serve. Well, I want to make sure we have options with a few different, we don't want it to like all be Western red cedars and Doug firs that are gonna need space. But I would recommend that we have a fairly limited number of options.
Yep.
And not get too complex with the offerings for year one.
Yeah, I agree.
That's good. Very good number.
Seems like it.
Well, so
20
still like the
each,
Gary
three
Oak.
different.
Gary Oak would be on my list of.
I built Gary Oak, Shore Pine and Vine Maple.
My maple can be really small. I planted my maple in my backyard and it's still a little sticker.
Do you think maybe service berry instead?
Cascara's
Yeah,
good
yeah,
Or
maybe.
Cascade?
too, and
Cascara.
does have a beautiful form. And,
Yeah.
yeah,
What was it?
the cascara.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful tree and just birds love it. They love also the serviceberry. It's nice to have trees that the birds really love.
And what was really flashy that we really liked about the community trees is it was really pretty. Like they were really selling those trees.
Yeah.
So I think when we are like selecting the three, something that kind of has the most year-round interest and flashiest,
Yeah.
get people excited.
Yeah.
Well, unless you want to push back on that, I heard Cascara.
Go along with that.
So I'm hearing Gary Oak, Cascara. Is Short Pine still on the list, or would we want to think of a serviceberry or?
The short pine grows really slowly. That's the only thing. It takes a long time. I got a little short pine and it's like 4 years and it's still a little tree. I can't get this thing going. But if you want a tree that's going to give like canopy, I would say the vine maple gives nice canopy and shade, but doesn't get too big and scary. So I would go for the vine over the shore.
It may depend on what variety you get of the black maple. The variety I got, let's say, it stayed quite small, it was not showing any sign of. What is it? And of course, I've seen vine maples, probably all see up, they're not very big. I would be less, I mean, vine maples tend to be really beautiful in the fall. But I'd be more inclined for the cascara, the serviceberry, Gary oak, Doug fir.
We're trying to
Would be
look,
my choice as well.
I think we're trying to go down to three then.
We are.
So the cascade situation and the
Gary Oak is just.
and so is the maple.
Yeah, vine maple
Road and a
deciduous.
conifer
So
there.
yeah, it seems like maybe we
On an evergreen.
throw in a conifer, yeah.
Oh, can I ask a question? Do we know if the Gary oaks, because I know oaks do bring in certain pests. Is it a tree that gets along with a lot of our native trees? And will it bring
It is a native
pests?
It is a native tree.
I think it's the only native oak for this Oregon and Washington, right?
I'm sorry, were you talking, Minda, about the shore pine or the Gary Oak?
Gary Oak.
I just know, look, I didn't know specifically much about the Gary oak, but I know I've seen
Well,
it in
all
warm,
of them are
dry.
native.
Pardon?
All of these are natives.
Cascade.
Yeah. My only experience with Gary oaks that I've seen are really in full sun, bright, kind of a sandy, thin soil, and they just get a ton of sun and they thrive in that. And I feel like in our area, we have a lot of part shade and not too much full sun. So I wonder if it will do well, if it will thrive well in our sort of more shady climate in the Lake Forest Park area.
Well, lots are different across the
Yeah,
city.
I'm thinking
They're
like
not all,
Sheridan Heights area is very exposed, or folks on the water,
So
very
very
exposed.
Gary Oak, Cascara, do we have a third, have an evergreen that we wanted to as our third with those two?
I'm inclined to agree with what somebody said. Gary Oak is gonna be a little more, if we're only gonna get three. Gary Oak is kind of specialized because it does need to be, if anybody, if you're familiar with the prairies, down like in Fort Lewis, the trees that grow up at the edge of the prairies are Gary Oaks. So they're used to being really exposed to the sun. And dry
Mhm.
conditions. They'd be a perfect tree for some situations. I'm not sure they're a perfect tree for a third of the situations of people who want to come get these trees. Yeah,
they're big on Whidbey Island.
Yeah.
What were top three that you're recommending?
Yeah, I would really, based on what other people said, I would say the cascara, the serviceberry and Doug fir. I think
Another thought, like maybe are people more, would the general public be more prone to just getting a tree that they have heard of and know of? So like the Doug fir, a cedar, and a vine maple. Like those call them in. People know they grow here. They're not like Gary oak, what's that? Or cascara, is that even native? Just.
Yeah,
That's fair.
yeah, it is. I think, I look at part of this as being an education process. That people will hopefully learn things that they didn't know.
Diversity is key, so.
I like the idea of including the Doug's fir. I mean, to round out that, what did we say? Cascara and the Gary oak.
Cascara, Doug fir, and then either serviceberry or Gary Oak. It sounds like Gary Oak may be a little more specialized, so possibly serviceberry instead.
Serviceberry, we could talk up the white blooms and then the edible factor to it, might be a nice piece.
The other thing is, since the water district already is offering a bunch of Gary oak, if people want one, they can pick one up there.
there you go.
Really?
Yeah, we got picked up a couple there.
When I went through last week, it was looking real sad.
Oh.
Things were very crispy.
Are we coming down to serviceberry, cascara, or Douglas fir?
Yeah, I like that.
And we can see this year what happens and probably get different ones next year.
And are we thinking of just doing like 20 each of those?
Yeah, we'll do that.
Evenly split?
Number of over 6
Yeah.
trees. People
What's
do need to
your-
be aware that Douglas fir is gonna get huge, or can get huge. It's not a front yard tree, if you've got a small yard, small lot, but again,
Yeah.
that's the job of the information we give them.
We got lots of folks with not small lot as well, though.
Yeah, we do.
So.
But there are people that vote for Habitat.
You have the price schedule over there for these, Mark?
Yeah, right, so we've got a calculator. Was it Gary? Oh, no, we said Serviceberry, Cascara. I'm sorry, what did we say?
Yeah, Cascara, Serviceberry, and Doug Fir.
And Douglas fir.
What's the price?
Serviceberry, yeah, Serviceberry, Cascara and Douglas fir. So, the Serviceberry. That's $6.65 each.
They all are.
They're not all the same price.
Yeah, so.
So 665 times 20 is something.
I'm doing the math for you. If you give me the next price, I'll keep going.
Okay, the Cascara, I think, is also 665. And the Douglas fir. That's 665. There is one difference.
You beat
The
it.
Carryover is cheaper.
500, 400,
That's usually getting the leftovers
$399.
from water district.
Yeah, get it from the water. Yeah, that's free. Well, so does that sound like a plan we can live with? At
Yes.
this point, they're asking for 60 trees. 20 of those three types, Serviceberry, Cascara, Douglas fir.
Can you remind me of the two drop-off date windows? It was the week of October 5th and November, what was that?
Yeah, the week of October 5th and the week of November the 2nd.
Okay, I have an email drafted to Alan at the water district. He's our water district manager. I'm going to copy you on it, giving him an outline of what we're hoping to do and the ask of, can we use your parking lot for this? I am going to, in this, say there are 2 weeks that we're looking at and see if they have any conflicts, because if they're like, yes, but we could only do it in November, then I suggest we do it in November. If they come back and they're like, yeah, either of those weeks would work, then we can go with what we discussed this evening of kind of, which one did we say? Trying to remember. If you write it down, which one our preference was,
I said
October.
October 5th.
October. So
Oh, like we say October.
see what he says. Are folks open to doing it in November if the water district is available, but only in November?
Sure.
Okay. I will hit send on this and then see what he says and hand it off to you to chat with him if he says yes.
Yeah, that's right. As a distribution, as a staging point where they could be delivered. And also as a pickup distribution center that we could use, so now.
Yeah.
They could pull up, people could pull up, well, I don't
And
know
this
the
is-
site, so I don't know how it drives
This
through.
is their parking lot that I think we could, it's only a one wide entrance, but I think we could easily set up a roundabout for people to pull in, pull around, pick up and then head out.
Little traffic management, it happens to be like a 3-hour. Morning.
I would suggest something like a 10 to noon on a Saturday or something like that,
Yeah,
or a 5 to 7 evening pickup.
and we could probably get an estimate right now of when our ideal date would be, for the actual distribution.
We can pick tentative dates if it's an October date, what date would we distribute? And then if it's November, what date would we distribute?
Cause they said they'll deliver the week, but they didn't give you a specific date.
No, not yet, we might get that, but so we
Yeah.
probably safe to say the week of the 12th sometime.
Do we want to do a weekend or a weeknight?
That time of year we can't. It's dark.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah,
So we can.
so that's maybe the 17th of October or the 24th is next week.
Do we want to hold them onto them that long or do like Sunday the 11th or Saturday the 10th?
I would think they want Saturday.
You said,
Well, I don't know, I guess if they're there, I mean, I guess we'd have to keep them watered.
you said the delivery was the week of the 12th?
The week of the
Week of the
5th.
fifth.
Week of the 5th, sorry. is it-
So the following,
So if they did
presuming
that-
if they say the week of the 5th, that I would assume means probably Monday through Friday delivery. Assuming that we would have them by the Saturday the 10th.
Yeah, you're counting on everything going right.
It's true.
It might be that the 17th would be safer for us to have all our ducks in a row, everything.
Well, maybe we can ask them, I mean, if they say the week of the 5th, can we plan on the 10th?
Yeah.
And we count on it being available that we could distribute on the 10th.
Yeah. Do you want to have about distributes more on the, outline?
First come, first served.
Yeah.
And then would folks be available, do we want to, if the water district says that we could use their space, but only in November, plan for Saturday the 7th? The same thing, the Saturday at the end of the week, as long as the 500 space folks are able to give us a
Yeah.
fair amount of confidence on timing. Okay. So you'll find out about purchasing and how we get approved for money,
What did that total come out to be again?
$399.
Plus tax.
Yes.
No, sure.
You'll find out about how we get money. You'll communicate that to Mark. Mark, once you know that we can get the money, you'll let 300 trees know what we want to purchase. Are you also going to be the point person on logistics and distribution, or would someone else like to?
We need at least 2 people. Maybe 3, be good for that, would probably for the duration, if it's 2 or 3 hour thing.
There's the day of, but I mean all of the like logistics leading up to it, making sure that we have the place, communicating with the water district if they say yes, or finding an alternative location. Getting materials made for any publication, publicity, getting materials made for educational materials about all of the trees,
No,
definitely. All of those things.
I think I'll too.
You three want to work together on
Yeah.
For separate thing.
all the various. You can claim different parts of that.
Thinking
Yeah, that'd
too,
be-
like for traffic control,
Yep.
like delineators and stuff. I don't know if the water district has those available, maybe if they approve the date, see if that's something, but otherwise maybe Public Works, we could.
I believe the city also had some like safety vests that we borrowed for the tree walk, if we can borrow a couple of those for the day.
Yeah, they probably, Corey and others, I guess, probably need a event permit application from us, which we've done several times before.
Sounds like something our planning team can put together.
Yeah.
Sounds like it's just,
Yeah.
we have 60 trees in 3 hours, that's 20 trees an hour, a tree every 5 minutes. If people come evenly spaced,
Which
tree every
they
5 minutes is probably reasonable, but evenly spaced is not. Yeah, they'll be rushes.
No, they'll come in clumps.
Larry, did you have?
Yeah, a couple of questions for you to think about. Like first, are there any secondary costs? Hiring a public works staff member to do something, or is the cost of the trees the sole cost of this event? And then second question, what is the plan if not all 60 trees are given away?
Well, if we can consider other options, the our trees. If there was if they fit into some other, replanting scheme that we have. Or the 300 trees organization will take the trees back. They will take them back, but they won't pay us to take them back.
What we can also talk to the water district about is how many would we be able to leave in the plant exchange as a continued. Take a tree if you want a tree and just leave in their lot if they don't get claimed.
Yeah, if we're keeping it starting with the number 60, I think we're not gonna be stuck with too many trees at the end. We find somewhere.
I'm just saying, if we end up being able to do it there, it may be a natural, like, we just walk away at the end of the day and leave the trees there.
Bring them anywhere.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think somebody should run this by Corey too. You be able to do that?
Yeah, I can do that, yeah.
The general outline of the plan.
Yes.
Maybe Ellen first, just to.
I already sent Alan an email just to say, like, we're thinking about this thing, if
Yeah.
we are doing it, would you be interested in partnering up with us as a location for distribution? We'll see what they say. If they say no. Do y'all have ideas of where you'll reach out to next for possible, it sounds like possibly the church over there, possibly one of the elementary schools. I'm guessing elementary school wouldn't be able to have us like drop it off and keep them there for a week.
Right, you city hall.
Yeah. Where would we keep them for the time leading up to the distribution? And then we'd have to figure out logistics of getting them there.
Yeah.
Have you done a trailer? Vision,
How many trees can we fit in this conference room for a week?
They're 3 feet tall and they're probably, what, like that?
Yeah.
So, I mean, 60 trees would probably, I mean, is that really gonna be that more than that much space? This part of it
That should fit. We can just take up part of this room, why not?
a couple of cars, couple of pickups to be able to, in a pinch if we had to. So it's not a huge lift if we have to.
You're basically behind this building that could be used. I recall meeting with Drew once, we were behind this building and it kind of opens, it's not her, enclosed space, but.
Yeah, it's kind of narrow.
Really got the police park above and parking lot down below.
Kind of, you know, one of our parks, Animal Park, place where we can store them for a week.
Yeah, there's stuff stored there. Sandbags and things.
Yeah. Yeah, so,
Leaving them unattended in a public space always runs the risk of them not all being there by the
Yeah.
but
we
our
are-
goal is to get
But
them.
we are
done.
giving them.
If somebody takes one and plants it, it's kind of terrible, they just vandalize all of them, that's really not nice at all.
Yeah.
But
If all else fails, they can put them in our driveway.
Will y'all also work out logistics on, are there going to be any further like restrictions or anything, or does it have to be like Forest Park residents? Do they have to show ID? Will we be tracking in any way who we give them to, if we're saying one per household? Are we tracking number of households in any way, or what households have already claimed them in any way? Do we want to do anything further other than you showed up in a car, so I will put a tree in your car?
Yeah,
Thank you.
great question. That was a great question, but I would say for this first time round, let's keep it low.
I would think so too. Let's go in naively.
And if we have,
If we're able to send them 10 trees to get more, I mean, that's great.
Is there any issue, since we are purchasing them with city funds,
Oh, interesting.
with us potentially giving them to folks who are not Lake Forest Park residents?
We can say in our material that it's for Lake Forest Park residents.
Yeah, let's do it.
Kind of residents, not businesses, would be concerned.
Right.
Be one or the other. or-
Trees, tree,
and if we have a whole bunch left in the last half hour, we can say, hey, you win the lottery, you get 3 trees.
We're having a 2-for-1 sale right now.
buy one, get one.
We could take names and phone numbers and say if if there are trees left over at the end of the day here, who wants to call you back?
It's like a quick little sign up sheet.
Yeah, that's something simple like that.
It's a great idea. If there's any trees, put your name here.
Okay, so it sounds like we got some work to do. Let's figure out a few things.
Are there any city events after that? I can't remember. We're pretty much summer.
Oh, I was trying to think
Like in the park, if it was September 12th.
So one of our next thing on the list is we will talk about outreach opportunities.
Well, just to sum up, just before we
Yep.
shift on, you're gonna follow up with Alan and on the basis of that, whether we
That
go
has
ahead with
been
that plan or
sent.
not.
And we'll see what she
She's on
says.
it.
I'm going to get back to 300 trees with this quest that we just talked about with 3 types. And also ask the question, could we count on the 10th as a distribution date?
And then the date in November too. We want to.
Yeah.
If we went in those, when, I think we were asking both, right? The October 2nd and then the same in November.
Would that weekend be available in November too, the same?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
For other events, if we don't distribute all of them or we need another opportunity, the pause in the park is right before, it's October 3rd. There will be at some point, but what I had, it was still TBD, there'll be a recycling event in Kenmore, doesn't feel like a right fit. If we end up distributing in November, there is November 22nd is the first of the holiday farmers markets and craft fairs. Which nothing stopping us from sitting outside with 10 trees and giving trees away at a holiday market. But it would be, if we did November, it would be a couple weeks out. So.
And then Larry also asked, are there any other costs?
other costs or other need for
Or city.
city support.
I think we need we were asking about the permit.
Maybe for somebody like Alan to unlock the gate for us, lock it.
Yeah, I don't know what their access would be on a Saturday, whether
Yeah,
the
maybe
availability
somebody
to their site would be.
We could,
So that's something, if he writes back and says we can potentially use the space, something to ask him about what the logistics would be on that. Just if there would be any associated costs.
I guess there's we also. Would be, when we send out communications from the city. Those, was that city staff would have to do that,
Email blast.
email blast. And what about how do we do it with materials, like if we can develop the digital content, but how we want to print out some things.
yeah, we want to have the nice things like the shoreline did for their trees, and we could give to each person to take with them.
In the past, I've sent things over to Elizabeth to get printed. She hasn't mentioned any specific cost for printing on things. I don't know how that gets billed within your office. Whether it just gets absorbed by the city or billed to your team or billed to
Yeah,
us, I'm not sure. But
I have no idea.
okay.
So one page flyer, something you'd be willing to take on?
Sure,
Absolutely. I'm sure you do a wonderful job.
that's okay.
And so if we announce this through a city flash news or something, it'd be nice to have a link where they could go to those three. Help to make a decision which is one they wanted, and then at the time when they pick up the tree, they either get one there or they can have access to one already or something, but.
Yeah,
So timeline wise, by 2 weeks and 2 days from now, we need to put in our order for trees. So we need to know that we're doing it and when we're doing it and where the trees will be delivered. 2 days after that, Saturday or Sunday, the 23rd, is the Lake Forest Park Farmers Market. And then 2 weeks after that, 3 weeks after that, on September 12th is the picnic in the park. So the 20, I would suggest that if we have outreach materials that are like a 1-page flyer or a 1/4-page flyer of come get a free tree, if we can have those available at the farmers market on the 23rd, that would be amazing. The details of where and when it's going to be, if we can get all of those details sorted out in 2 weeks.
Yeah, the 23rd of which month?
23rd of August is the farmers market. 12th of September is picnic in the park. And it would be great to be able to have this info at both. If possible. If we can't make the deadline of August 23rd, then we can have information at the September picnic in the park.
Yeah.
And even if we don't have all the details, we can tell people at the farmers market, find us at picnic in the park, and we'll have more information about a tree giveaway this
Yeah,
fall.
or those smart people, these are like 3 trees, you might wanna do your own research on what you think.
That's what
If we don't have-
if we have a flyer that has, it'll be these trees, this date, this place, first come, first serve.
And I should have looked this up sooner, it's so easy for me to pull it up. The city shall use the city tree account funds, this is in code 1614-120. For the following purposes: acquiring, managing, maintaining, enhancing and preserving forested areas within the city. Planting and maintaining trees within the city. And other purposes relating to trees as determined by the city council. So it does have to be within the city, and we might need to do some sort of like a driver's license check. Just to confirm, instead of relying on the honor system, that could be possible.
let's see, how would we get confirmation on that?
Show an ID with an LFP address.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
It's mail.
I mean, whether we have,
Yeah, whether we could just say,
yeah, we say on the flyer.
well, the residents only.
Right.
LFP ID required.
Yeah, valid.
Yeah.
Well, is it enough
Correct.
I mean, if we did a sign up sheet, you pick up your tree, we'd like to know your name and do you live in LFP?
Well, not do you, but where do you live in LP?
Yeah.
They have it.
So that they would be certifying essentially that they live in LFP.
Councilmember Goldman,
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm continuing to poke around the shoreline site and they are very formal. There's an application people have to fill out. If it's their first time in the program, there's a training session over by the rec center by 185th Street to again learn about how to make care for trees. And it is limited to shoreline owners, residents, business owners, that sort of thing. Um, I'm guessing first time through, you don't want to be as formal as that, but at the very least, driver's license, utility bill, something that shows that you live or work in LFP. I think that would satisfy the requirement.
Yeah. Oh, we make that, sure. Right.
I feel like that seems reasonable since it is being paid for and run by the city.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We're trying to improve our canopy.
No.
yeah. So,
I don't have a problem with business doing it, so you were saying only 3 people. And if a business wants to put a tree in their front yard. That's actually where we have the fewest trees is that the areas of businesses are, so I would prefer not to put that restriction on, let's put it that way.
You could say, Lake Forest Park residents and business owners.
yeah.
Yes.
So just the exact language from Shoreline is homeowners, renters, apartment complexes, townhomes, condos, schools, churches, and businesses can apply. So yeah, casting a very wide net.
We'll definitely look at those materials.
It could be shorter, so you can't apply.
Yes, but then they get negative, like.
Well, maybe you can just confirm with Alan, and if that's a go-ahead, then we can probably in addition, it's separate from the 3 flyers might be a statement. Blanket statement that we've been just discussing, who's eligible for these trees.
Email said you're copied on it, so as soon as Alan replies, I'm guessing he won't be tonight. So,
And I'm not gonna talk to her, I think Barbara, until hear from you.
okay. Cool. If there's anything the 3 of you need info from the rest of the board on, as you start planning and logistics, let us know. In the sake of time, I'm going to move us on to outreach, if that's good. So as I was mentioning, we have got 2 already scheduled events and 1 event that we haven't discussed that we can decide whether we want to table at. The next one, I confirmed with Corey today that we can have a spot. We do need to provide our own table and tent. I'm happy to provide the table. I should be able to provide the tent as well. At the farmers market, it is family day at the market on the 23rd of this month. Setup needs to happen by double check. Setup needs to be done by 9:50 and then the market runs from 10 to 2. We talked last time, I believe we had folks tentatively penciled in. Stacy, do you know if you're able to do the morning of the 23rd?
I think so.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So we had it
What month is it again?
this month,
This month. Yeah, I think I can do it.
in just a couple weeks.
Yeah.
So we had, it would be 10 to noon, we had Richard and Stacy penciled in. And then afternoon, myself and Mark.
Double check that. That's for the farmers market.
That is for the farmers market. Yep, so it's general community outreach and chatting with people. That one we tend to have a lot of non-LFP residents. So.
Confirmed.
Mark, are you good to work the afternoon with me? 12 to 2?
Yes, that's fine, but it sounds like you're key to the setup too.
Yes, I can coordinate either. It can be there that morning, or I can coordinate with one of you to get you the tent and table on like the Friday before.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the tabling materials box, is one of you able to coordinate with Christy to get that from the city at some point?
Yeah, I'm going away for a couple.
I would assume Stacy or Richard, so that you have it at the beginning of the day.
What
Yeah.
box is this?
We have a Rubbermaid tote full of all of our tabling supplies and then our banner.
So
It's with,
Flyers and stuff.
That would be
it's
fine.
with the city. Is it with the city right now? Christy, it's with you in your office or something?
So
So someone just has to pick, so I just have to pick it up on Friday?
or sometime the week.
Well, not
Well,
Friday.
yeah,
Not Friday.
city hall's not open on Friday anymore, so that'd
Oh,
be
right.
Thursday.
So
Anytime
Thursday,
now is the
before-
21st.
Yeah,
I'm really flexible. I can do it Thursday before what time you guys close? 5 o'clock?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, before 5.
Thanks, Stacy.
So
Yeah.
figure out sometime between the now and the 21st, coordinate with Christy and pick up a box.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
So City Hall won't be open on Saturday during the. It won't be open on Saturday during the market.
No. Passports maybe, but not the city hall.
Correct.
Well, could you stick in passport people?
You can't get in
They'll take care of
unless
it.
you got a passport,
Yeah.
usually.
Grabbing the box ahead of time
Yeah, but it's,
shouldn't be a problem.
since you only really want to move it about 20 feet.
I mean, it's literally just a
Yeah, but I mean,
Rubbermaid
you're
tote.
starting out with the inside the building, or something, and ending up outside the building by way of somebody's house.
Yeah.
It's the way.
If for some reason that doesn't work out, I'm happy to swing down at sometime that week. So let me know, Stacy, if you get busy or aren't able to come down.
Guaranteed I will be able to do it.
Great. So that is the market on the 23rd, and then a picnic in the park is going to be coming up in September. And that is going to be from 10 to 2 over at Animal Acres, I believe. Yep, Animal Acres. We had tentatively scheduled Stacy and I in the morning, and then Ross and Doug in the afternoon. Does that still work for folks, or would anyone else like to get in on that?
Good.
Not good.
Stacy, you and I for the morning over at the park?
Yeah, September 27th.
September 12th.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I keep getting these dates wrong.
All good.
How's that food poisoning?
August 23rd here, and then September 12th over at Animal Acres. And then the third event that Corey let me know about today is the Pause in the Park event. That is October 3rd. Are folks interested in a third outreach and tabling event for this fall? In addition to also a tree giveaway, so that would give us 4 Saturday events in the next 2 to 3 months. Is there an appetite for that? Would we like to be at another event?
What would you be doing? Just outreach about the tree board?
It'd be really good for like the fine, like it'll be hot on people's minds about the tree, if we could pull off the tree giveaway.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, it's good for it's fall for that's a good time for planting. So it's going to be on people's minds for planting trees. So I think I'd be happy to do that on October 3rd.
Put it all to the park.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's not one that I've been to.
People bring their dog. Dogs.
Okay. She was just like, you want to
Bunch of
come
dogs.
to this?
Pretty much, yeah. I did not get any further. She sent out all the details for picnic in the park with the application that I will be filling out and submitting for on behalf of the tree board for a table of picnic in the park. I wrote back and said, by the way, are we confirmed for the farmers market? And she said, yes. Also, I'll be sending out info soon on Pause in the Park if you're interested. And I said, TBD. So she hasn't sent out all the formal information about it yet.
I think it's fine. That's not the best idea of the other two, frankly.
It is less, usually I would say it's one that like, we don't need to be there. If we are running our own event that we're trying to tell people about a week later, it seems like it might not be a bad idea to have.
Yeah. And I guess always I'm good to do things like that. That would be the number 3 on my list. Yeah, in terms of the attention of people. There's a lot of running around frolicking with dogs. You know, not your thing, dog people do, you know?
Yeah.
We would need to find out if the trees were offering just the dog urine.
Yeah.
Yeah, these trees do well with dog urine.
Right. And if it's not, so don't get a Douglas fir here.
So I heard Minda say that you would be open to tabling at that. Do we have anyone else who would be interested in tabling on the 3rd and available?
Are we out of town that weekend?
Okay,
On the chicken see.
What are there times? Is it
I didn't
2
know yet.
hour or whatever?
I'm guessing it'll be 10 to 2 or something similar, since it seems like most of the events are, but.
I bet it'd be shorter. I bet it'd be a 2 hour thing. I don't know. What would but
I can wait
that
for,
parade used to be a big, an hour and a half, 2 hours of that parade.
when she sends out the formal information, I can send it to the group and we can decide at that point. But I don't know how the timing will work out in terms of we only have one more meeting, this group, between now and then, so. Sounds good.
I'm wondering if we can get more coloring books. More coloring pages.
Coloring pages, absolutely.
I hate to keep looking at Kyle.
No, I mean, I love doing that kind of stuff, so yeah, I'd be happy to.
I mean, we've got some that we use and the kids like them. They are really kind of good because kids get something to do and the parents are there and you talk to them and it's a natural connection.
Yeah,
Both the farmer's market and a picnic in the park, they recommend having activities for kids, so I suggest that our main thing at the table will be the coloring for both of those. Usually what I've done, the box should have our existing coloring pages, but it would be amazing if we have some refreshed new ones. There should be still crayons and colored pencils in the box. And I believe the box still has a roll of just like brown, like painting paper to put down your painting that I usually just like taped over the table so that as kids color off the paper, they're just coloring on brown paper and it can be rolled up, thrown away at the end of the day for birthday would be the day.
yeah, that was really good last year because the kids would come and color, and then the parents would start talking about trees.
Yes, highly recommend grabbing some candy to have at the table as well. Great way to get children to talk to you.
It's in the box, isn't it?
I don't know if there's any candy left in the box from our last event, I'm not sure.
Coloring pages, are they?
I don't know where the
full
box
size
is.
or quarter ones as well?
I did half-page ones, I can send you my Canva file of the ones that I made, I literally just took clip art of different trees, I put like fun facts about like Forest Park trees on it, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
felt good.
Sure.
They're very simple.
I
They're
could
not-
probably, yeah, that'd be great to sort of leverage.
Yeah.
And I'll create something that are maybe more Lake Forest Park specific.
Yeah.
Whatever that might be, but yeah, something.
Yeah.
something fun.
That'd be great.
Yeah, could feature different parts or something.
Yeah, like,
For the tree ones.
Okay, I will confirm us for picnic in the park. I will work on getting a canopy and a table to one of the two of you before farmer's market.
Okay.
I am likely to be like driving back into town that morning, so I don't want to promise that I will be at City Hall before 10 a.m. to give you a table. So I will probably drop it off with one of you the week before, if that's all right. And then we will decide whether we're gonna do pause in the park based on availability and details of that event when they come out. That's
Good.
our events check-in. Any other outreach? It sounds like once we have confirmed plans for logistics, timing, date, etc., tree species, we'll do some other outreach for the giveaway. A handout for events would be great. We can talk to, in the past, the city has been eager for social media content that is engaging and has been willing to post on city socials. Are there other pieces of outreach that would be specific to that and to do for the next couple months?
That the city would post through What meeting?
We've had them post through their city socials before, social media.
Okay.
There's also not just the quarterly, but is there still a monthly like e-newsletter,
So, yeah.
that we can look at?
So is that somewhere we would put our tree giveaway, share some information about that?
And when,
Yeah.
and when Minda finishes editing the tree walk with Richard, does the city have a place to post that or?
Unfortunately not. I had asked Kat who accepts the articles, and so I was curious. I was like, is there a place for a QR code that where it would take me to the city website? And she said, unfortunately, we don't have anything like that. She highly recommended like a blog, like an e-blog for the tree board for those sort of things. I don't know what kind of capacity you guys have for that, but
We
Yeah.
we just do ourselves or.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, just seems like the articles are always a little more, bolstered than the little article allows. So yeah.
We'll use Shoreline Area News or the town crier, just those two post them,
I think the original question though that I heard from you, Ross, was where, once we have a video of the free walk, is there a place like a city YouTube channel that can be posted to? That it can live and then be referenced in those like articles, et cetera.
Yeah.
One time I raised that with Joanne, I think Joanne's still working here,
No, I'm not.
assistant clerk. She was,
I don't think so.
I thought that the answer was yes, that it's something that could be accommodated. Short video. So I don't know unless you know something different, Christie or Larry or somebody knows anything
They
else.
have a Facebook account. Post a video.
Yeah.
Don't fail to have an Instagram. Or Twitter.
Yeah, I assume this video that we're talking about would be longer than we would want to just like post on Facebook. It would be something that you would want to like post on something like a YouTube channel and have a link that can then be shared in other venues.
I can imagine like elementary schools might be interested in using it too, so it'd be nice to have it on YouTube.
Does someone want to hunt around and see, do you want to either ask around, continue to ask around, or would you like someone else to
I think I could.
ask
I
around
could
and
ask.
see
Yeah.
what might be possible?
I mean, there's a YouTube channel the city has, there's city council stuff, but other things posted on there, so. Seems like that would be a good. Potentially good venue for it.
Minda, we were just talking about ways to post the video that you're editing.
Oh, that's great. Where do I post it? And where do I
That's
send
I'm
that?
getting an answer to, and Christy's gonna look into it for us.
Okay, great.
What is the length that it's turning out to be, Linda?
I haven't been editing. I was traveling and I just got back like 2 days ago, a few days ago. So I'm I will look at it. I mean, we shot like 30 minutes.
Okay.
So it'll probably be half that amount.
Awesome.
I like the idea of it being interspersed with city council meetings. Yeah. Pre-board meetings, I guess.
All the meetings. Anything else on outreach, or are we moving on to updates on the article? Which are also kind of out. Where do you stand with things?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't notice a email from Richard till too late to get it into the.
From Christie up.
Yeah. But we added a little bit more sentence, so I'll pass this around. So what we were thinking is that if people agree, we could offer it to the Shoreline News and the Town Crier.
Can you email that to me since I'm not there in person?
Sure. run out to my car and get my phone and,
I can do it, Rob.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
you sent it to me, right? Maybe that's the same, the same.
yeah, there's pretty much, it's pretty close, yeah, it just has the additional part you wanted about.
And I'll text you a picture of it right now as well.
Okay,
Okay.
You're not compost down here, that almost certainly means you're not home compost. Because those things are okay in industrial compost.
right,
In city stuff, they thrive. We had this discussion before with relation to some other kind of seeds.
right,
And the answer was that, you know, you don't want to compost it at home.
yeah.
Yeah, so.
So do not home compost would handle that,
That would be perfect.
And this goes out every 3 months, 2 months? How often is the newsletter?
No, that goes out every week, that.
Oh.
It's too late for the. City newsletter.
Are we shooting for the next city newsletter? Or are we just gonna move forward with other distribution?
say let's do both, because
Okay.
we have a 250 word one that would go in the city newsletter, and then we could do the same or elaborate a little bit and post it do shoreline area news.
I think it's is it quarterly. It's
I
quarterly.
think it's quarterly.
Every
The
3 months.
cities, yeah.
So. End of October. Will be the next deadline, should
Sounds
be.
about right, yeah.
Unless we have another one. I know we've talked about some other kind of article.
We discussed, I think it's in the minutes.
It was like drought resistant trees.
Yes, I believe that was
Right.
what we
that's-
talked
Mark
about,
started following up. on
which
that.
isn't particularly like seasonally necessary at a specific time that can easily get pushed to the next one beginning of the year.
Yeah,
Cool. Thank you for bringing this up.
Yeah, well, then that's.
That last bullet under the 5, under the how to remove. Use the whole, I don't know if you're interested in any thoughts at this point, Russ, but. Use the whole to add native planted trees recommended by the LFP tree board. Are we recommending trees? We're not really recommending trees, are we?
well, we have that tree list.
The tree list.
The photo that's there,
Yeah,
and it'll be updated by the time they just get that.
it seemed to be a bit more accurate, a native plant or a tree. Listed on the LFP tree list.
Well, in parentheses, that's where they would find it. At the end there.
I think the distinction Mark's trying to make though is that all of the trees on the tree list is very long. The tree list isn't necessarily a list of trees that we are recommending actively. They're just the trees that we are saying count towards your replanting permit. There's no distinction on there of like, these are the things that the tree board suggests you put into your yard.
Okay,
Am I correct in that interpretation, Mark, of what you were saying?
Yeah, I just think I don't think of us as authorities.
There's no trees on there I don't recommend, right?
Huh?
I mean, we
There
generally
kind of are-
recommend trees,
There
so
are though, like black, but we're gonna edit.
we're trying to get them out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Technically, but
As of right now, yes, there are things we actively don't recommend.
Okay, but we gotta.
We're
fix it.
working on this.
yes, yes.
So it's not just the tree board, though, that more work was done on that update by Drew than by us.
Yeah.
I mean, Dick and I worked with her on it, and she's the one who really knew, she was the one who really knew the trees, so saying it's a tree board production is kind of. So, I wanna say selfish,
but that is not available to the public.
so
Yeah.
the tree list, well,
The work that we're doing, the proposed is not right, the public, what's probably listed trees with Ross's reference here is current tree list. Yeah, I imagine, which is
So I would say just
fine,
amending,
fine, it's what we have now, so that would be the list to refer people to.
use the whole to add a native plant or a tree from the LFP tree list. Instead of saying specifically recommended by the tree board, no reason to call us out in that sentence.
I think so, yeah,
Adapt
okay.
it to
That works.
name where we are pointing people to.
I have a thought as well on the title. I wonder if we could use this as more of a call to action. And maybe say why you should remove your English holly versus just why. It may, catch people's attention and think, oh, I've got this out front, I never thought about this. Might just be a little bit more pointed.
Why you should remove.
I'd be okay with that.
Yeah,
Why?
we cut it down big to get that 250 word limit.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
But
right.
for the
And that's,
news.
right, the requirement, yeah.
if,
You want a statement or a question? This is a question, I actually kind of like the question. Why should you remove, it's a two-word switch, why should you remove, or why? Remove, or that's what it said, anyway,
Why you should remove your.
that's why you should remove your statement, why should you remove the question? And I kind of like the question myself.
Why should you remove English Holly?
Yeah.
Everybody agree?
I'm curious if, in the interest of words, it's feeling like there are quite a few words that like this King County URL is lengthy. And same with like, how necessary do we feel like it is to have the poison.org and pollenlibrary.com? Or do we feel like those are things that people are going to, it goes out on a paper copy, so it won't be a clickable link, correct?
Right, yeah.
And is that something that people are likely to actually like type in that? Or are people likely to say, huh, I didn't know they were toxic, and then Google Holly toxic and get there themselves?
Yeah.
So just in the interest of how many words do we have, that would be my suggestion of the first place to look for potentially slimming out.
Yeah, the reason we put the King County is that we didn't want to list a specific herbicide.
Yeah,
We wanted to delete, let somebody else do that, just for legal reasons.
Could you say, I'm not sure what the exact word would be, for details, see the King County Holly fact sheet?
Yeah.
That would be,
Mhm.
but since you can't click on it anyway.
because then you can, Google
Something,
search
something
King County
Google
Holly
goes to
fact
that sheet.
It's like a nice long line of text there.
It's too bad you can't back Google from there, just.
I was gonna say, I would definitely glance at that and then
Yeah.
Google English Holly fact sheet
Yeah,
instead of
yeah,
typing that all in.
We could tell them to just search for,
Yeah.
that PDF
Yeah,
from King County.
And
That first line under additional info. I see the other ones are bulleted and start with capital letters. Is the first one also intended to be a bullet, I wonder?
it could be, this was, the upper part was the 250 word one. And then the additional information was, more
or
information.
anywhere
for-
that we have enough
Right,
text.
but we could certainly bulletproof it.
Well, I just think it should be consistent. If
Yeah.
there are 3 points there, there's some format treated consistent.
Yeah.
And with like the pollen library, we just wanted to say that there was actually some scientific research. We weren't just saying, oh yeah, we've heard that it's causes allergies, but it actually does, so. This is all good editing. It's nice to have a group.
So you said actual 250 words, you think you're actually gonna publish stops after the tree list or thereabouts?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
well, I guess is there a question, is there anything on that additional info that should try to cram into the part above?
Yeah, now that we're getting out of the Long King County thing. Since that obviously probably doesn't count as one word. Right there.
Similar. So the one right below it, late summer and fall is best per Penn State extension. I'm not sure that necessarily warrants a
Yeah, I guess
citation.
maybe for us, in case somebody. We were trying to be,
I appreciate
Scientific,
the,
yeah.
the attention to detail.
but you're right,
But
yeah.
for general public communications, it feels like we can confidently say that this is the best season.
Yeah,
Sorry, I cut you off.
No, that's right. A minor point, but where it says berries are toxic to children and pets, they're also toxic to adults as well, right? Don't want to mislead people to think like kids are vulnerable to it, but adults are not.
yeah, except usually adults don't eat the,
You could
I know.
say especially the children's pets.
yeah.
Or to humans and pets.
I don't the cheese, these are tiny and unpleasant to chew. I think that's bordering that kind of obvious.
We can just put like humans and pets.
Yeah. You're going up, chew holly leaves, you deserve whatever happens. There's someone who has holly growing in a jar.
Any other article things we need to chat about this month?
There's an interesting article brewing. The three of us were assigned to do some thinking about it. I don't think I've done a little on my own, but yeah, certainly. And that is, what's the effect of global warming gonna be on forests in the western Washington or something like that?
In 250 words or less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
That's a big topic for 200
And,
words.
well, at least for city purposes, yeah. No, I think it's a really good article, and so I reached out to Drew, a former arborist here, who was just really sharp on the science, and she passed along several references that are very detailed, and I think you saw those.
Yeah.
You guys saw.
I haven't read it all, Mark, but I appreciate you doing all of it.
I haven't figured out how to interpret them in a way that's how to distill it down to the top 5 that we could definitely recommend, top 5 that we should say you should probably want to avoid these.
Yeah.
It's a big table and it's got a lot of data in it and describes heat factors and adaptability factors for probably 150 types of trees in the Northwest. I should share with you, Doug, you might want to, you could might make more sense of it, but so I'm struggling with it in terms of trying to, because I think it's a key resource. People actually working on this, that very topic, of course there are, and
Well, we could run it through AI and obviously check it, but AI is pretty good at.
boil this down.
Because I asked how much you would need to supplement a 24-inch red cedar tree here during the month of summer in Seattle, and it said about 240 gallons every week if you have sandy soil, every 2 weeks if you have more mixed soil. So that was kind of interesting. It's only about 15 minutes with the average hose.
Yeah, and this study, but also this report also, it has 3 scenarios that are built into it. One is a low emissions future, and a medium emissions future, and a high emissions future in terms of trying to assess adaptability of different types of trees. So it's a pretty complex table that it's put together.
I'll give it a try. I mean, we need to proof it, right? And then, and go back, but I'm willing to give it a shot.
Good, I'll do that. We'll see what they come up with.
If we're looking at Holly for the November article, then we would be looking at early 2027 for that article. So we have a little bit of time for the LFP newsletter specifically. Christy or Councilmember Goldman, do you have any update on hiring for the climate coordinator? Does the city have one of these now?
She's on,
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I am guessing that is someone who we could also run this kind of thing by.
Yeah.
What is her name?
Marita.
Oh, that's good.
What's her last name?
We're actually drawing quite great.
No worries. You're human.
I'll make a point for it. Hold on a second.
We have crossed paths enough with the climate action committee when they were in full force. I don't know about other folks. I think it would be interesting as she gets settled in to potentially have her come and present to us at some point about her role and what her role with the city is and how we can potentially join forces or where there may be overlap in what we're doing outreach and education around and what she may be doing, et cetera. I don't know if other folks think that would be interesting as well, but I would love to just hear more about what she's doing with the city.
Yeah, Marita Davidson.
Thanks.
Davidson, no D, no second D.
Interest of time, we have 11 minutes left. Anything else on articles?
Nope.
Awesome.
It was one thing. In years past, we've published something about Christmas trees, and I can't even recall what it was. Mark, you got to remember though. I don't know if it was what to do with your Christmas tree when you're done with it, or advantages of a live tree, or advantages of an artificial tree. You remember any of those articles that have been published under our date?
That we actually got to the point of publishing.
Yeah, that's a good
I
point.
know we've discussed that a couple of times.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we ever did that. My experience with a live Christmas tree didn't work out well at all. And other people have had different experiences.
Well, I actually, I cut tree as opposed to an artificial, totally artificial tree.
So when I was growing up, we had a tree that I planted, and then every year we would put it in a big garbage can and bring it inside for 2 weeks and decorate it, take it back out, replant it, and that did well for about 4 years.
Cool.
Yeah.
What I believe last year or the year before, the other Richard did a article about holly. Did we ever actually publish that article about holly? So that's something, especially that one I believe was specifically tailored around like it's everywhere right now. It's pretty, but it's not good. So looking at the timeline for when this will be going in the LFP one, if we do shoreline areas around the same time, since we have a longer word limit, we may want to just retool some of the language and make it holiday specific with that timing. I'm gonna move us on. Number 9, new business, nothing.
Well, except
Which I was gonna talk about in agenda for the next meeting is
Yeah.
homework for the next meeting
Homework.
and what we should be looking at.
Yes, did everybody see? I just printed off the health topic. I don't think
And I don't think we have digital copies. Did it go out with the packet or will you send it out after this?
I will send it out after this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the reminder. So kind of figuring how the
it's
whole.
readily available on the website.
It is, yeah, but I can send it out still.
Search for health topic 28B.
Yeah, super helpful. It's very condensed code in a kind of more of a readable format, I would say, too, with bullets and such. I guess my homework would just be give it a quick glance, see if there's anything that kind of maybe triggers more thought. Yeah, this kind of all came up. Mark was mentioning at the last meeting that part of my goals for the rest of the year was to understand and implement code, but it kind of felt like a few of you in the room were like, oh, I'd like to understand code more too. We could all use a refresher. So that's kind of what spurred this. And yeah, we can kind of next meeting do a little Q&A, or if there's any more clarification. And certainly not all the code is on there, obviously, like the tree fund. It's like I'm pretty sure it's in the code. It's at the very bottom, but it's there. So yeah.
One clarification, there's 2 pages here,
Yes.
but they look similar
Very
but not
similar.
identical.
Yes,
Are
one
they
is
2 different
related to
versions, or-
development.
Okay,
That's the second one. Yes.
okay.
But they both say development and use for preview though.
They do.
Yes, they do. One says development twice. so
Correct.
just one.
Oh, okay.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tree removal and replacement. Oh, development and use review. And then there's tree removal and replacement.
Development.
Development.
Right.
And
Development.
so, yeah, development and use review. Yeah, kind of disregard. I actually thought about highlighting that. Maybe I should have. But yeah, so the development is gonna be related to development, and those are always major tree permits.
Okay.
Not that like all only development is major, because like Mark learned, you have critical area, major. So that kind of,
Can you send that stuff electronically, please?
yes, absolutely, yep.
Okay.
Maybe the first one should very well.
The same thing for the article also. I know Minda asked for a screenshot of it, but we can't see anything over here.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Maybe the first one should be, or the second one should be tree removal and replacement homeowners. Or
Absolutely.
Maybe. It would switch.
So in the first section, it says dead trees, no permit is required, but before you said that it's in,
That's what, and remember how I was like, we could maybe edit the
Oh, okay.
code
yeah,
to clarify that. 'Cause,
Yeah.
yeah, right now, I'm quite surprised how many people actually inform me of a tree removal of a dead tree. I'm like, thank you, it's fantastic. This is ideal.
yeah,
They send me photos and everything. They usually provide me their address at the same time. I'll do like a quick check, which is how I kind of double check that this isn't like in a wetland or on a stream buffer, right on a stream. In which I would have to unfortunately inform. Luckily, that hasn't happened yet. So inform them like, the code does say that, but due to the location of critical area, we really need to make sure that you understand the sensitivity of that area and the limit of disturbance that's allowed there. Yeah.
And that's how I interpret that bullet point under no permit is required, but photos must be sent for confirmation before removal, and that would be like confirmation that no permit is required.
Yeah,
There may be other circumstances happening that
yeah,
change
maybe
that.
even specifically mentioning that
Yeah.
critical area is the trigger there.
So our homework is to review these 2 pages before next time.
Yeah,
Come with any clarifications or questions about it,
Yeah.
and then you will be doing some
yeah,
presentation education.
yeah.
Awesome.
and is there a reason that you don't have any prices listed?
What?
The cost for the permits?
Oh, interesting that that's not on there. I don't know if it's because it's something that's changed frequently in the past or not.
It could be helpful to have one.
Yeah.
Expectation setter.
Well, and yeah, maybe next month too, if you guys see little suggestions too,
Yeah.
absolutely provide those. I don't know, I think these actually might be pretty easy to update. That's
Awesome.
kind of Elizabeth's expertise.
Do you have an email address that isn't your name?
No,
Urban Forest Planner is not, the reason I'm saying is that if you do it, all of our other
So-
arborists have done.
on there it says a planner, but did
No,
we
it says-
change-
it says
we changed
Deidre.
it to my name, so
Yeah.
I knew it. So Elizabeth can change these really quickly and very easily.
Yeah.
Um,
But I mean, it might be sort of useful to have one that, an address that is good forever.
we talked about creating like arborist ad.
Yeah,
LFD.
yeah, like that.
And we just decided quickly just to change it to my name because we had a planner, which is just a general
Yeah.
planner, and then it always gets forwarded to me by several people, so I get duplicates that happen to you.
Yeah.
That's right.
Problem is, we've done so, I really hope you stay here
But it's
long after I retire.
for me to check though.
But
Just another email.
Map, have it forward to you.
I was gonna say, if it's
Yeah.
only for tree stuff, they should be able to just set it up as an auto forward to your inbox, but
Okay.
anyway, we have 3 minutes left, so let's not get into that.
Green guru at Lake Forest Park.
The other thing that had been on the notes from last time that we talked about getting an update this meeting and didn't, was checking back in on ordinance updates. I assume that will be part of that conversation next month for things that will be brought forward
Like the
to.
tree list. Yeah, yes.
Yep, any other like code adjustment language things that we had
Yeah.
talked about that I know Drew had drafted some minor language change recommendations, et cetera.
Yes.
Great. Any other items that folks want to make sure are on the agenda for next time? I assume we will keep the A, B, and C, so an outreach check-in since we'll be partway through those events, the tree giveaway information. Since that will be hopefully moving forward, and then the general check-in on is there any movement on the KCD map? Which could probably just get moved to reports and announcements. We can keep it there. Anything else that should be on the agenda for next time?
Sounds good.
Great. I will not be here for the next meeting. There's a slim chance I'll log in online, but it will be very late where I am, so I probably won't be here. So I believe Stacy will be appearing for us next time, just FYI. Anything else, or would someone like to move to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Have a good evening. Meeting is adjourned. 8:59.
Nice work.
All done.
You are good.
Where are you gonna be again?
I'm gonna be in Toronto / Buffalo for a couple weeks.
Or,